Okay, I want to talk about the New York Times article, How Tom Sandoval Became the Most Hated Man in America. So, the first part of the interview was a one on one with Tom in his home with him and his newly acquired 23-year-old with a background in PR crisis, who was clearly fresh out of the gate. She did not even flinch when Sandoval compared himself to the recently incarcerated Danny Masterson. She didn't appear with any urgency to clear up the George Floyd and the O.J. Simpson comparison, and even referenced herself being in middle school with her friends, thinking VPR was quote unquote so epic. Is this a case of Tom just surrounding himself with and or paying people that are willing to gas him up and put him on this icon pedestal? Or is this young PR manager just a reflection of a young generation with not enough life experience or awareness to fully comprehend the repercussions of Sandoval's outlandish opinions? The thing is, Sandoval tries tirelessly to compare him and the whole Scandoval situation to as many other things as possible, as he did with many references in this interview. But he needs to stop comparing. They rarely have valid connections and just make himself look so unaware and downright ignorant. So, some of the comparisons in this article were as follows. The first one, he did say, I feel like I got more hate than Danny Masterson, he told me, and he's a convicted rapist. The interviewer admitted that she thought Tom having a crisis PR manager in the mix would be an obstacle for answers to her questions, but as the interview stated, but my fears were put to rest when she didn't flinch at the Danny Masterson comment. Riley is 23 and has watched Vanderpump since she was in middle school. The other comparison he made was he started to feel as if he were in Uncut Gems, the nerve-jolting Safdie brothers movie in which the protagonist is isolated and on the run. Tom, let's be very real. You were never the main character of VPR. You were tolerated. You were just half of the Tom and Tom duo, the ex-boyfriend of Kristen Doty, and the lesser half to Ariana. You were never the number one guy in the group, and your narcissistic and cringy presence have only grown increasingly more every season that aired. So everyone probably is already aware of the O.J. Simpson and George Floyd comparison. The interviewer said, I looked over at Riley, who was typing furiously on her phone. I think I knew what he meant. He was trying to express the oddity of becoming the symbolic center of a nationwide discussion and a major news story. What he communicated instead was something more honest, which is just how much the experience had made him lose perspective. That is very insightful. Speaking of losing perspective, here are a few more excerpts from the interview that highlight that perception that interviewer made perfectly. He was quoted saying, the scandal has made the show so big, it's kind of cool and crazy, he said, even though it's negative and at my expense. So you're going to tell me this whole situation that you just want to move on from, that has caused you thoughts of suicidal ideation and claiming you've been so remorseful for, you are now going to reference it as being kind of cool? I'm confused. I think it's comments like that which reiterate the assumption that he doesn't really grasp the personal effect that his actions have had to the people he quote unquote loves or cares for, and also why a lot of people can't even comprehend his expectation of forgiveness and grace. So, another excerpt. When we drove to West Hollywood that first night, he emerged on Sunset Boulevard, not far from the huge billboard that showed him commando crawling across a rope suspended high above the ground. If it weren't for Scandoval, Sandoval said, I could have probably gotten on the show, but I wouldn't have been on the billboards. Seems to me that he's just proud of this newly acquired status, despite how he got the recognition, and he seemed almost appreciative, which just makes me feel like this dude is just full of pure delusion. So another part is Riley remembered watching that episode where he punched Jackson, taking credit, which Sandoval said that scene was he was basically taking credit for sending VPR quote unquote into the stratosphere. And Riley was, like I said, watching this with her middle school friends. We were like, this show is epic, she said. And Sandoval replied, dude, it was. He was also quoted saying, I have no respect for reality TV before, he said, and now I don't have very much respect for actors. I'm like, y'all try doing this. I'm sorry, Tom, try doing what? Blowing your own life up from your own actions and situations you created for yourself, not being truly remorseful for any of it, playing victim, and projecting onto other people? Seems he should have respect for actors because at least they can be believable when they have to pretend to be sorry for turmoil their characters might have caused. And most quality actors can also detach themselves when they are playing a role, but it seems Sandoval is stuck in his own delusional reality of a world. He can't even step out of his own narcissism to take any kind of believable accountability to anyone in this situation. So the interviewer also asked him if Scandoval was possibly or could have been a fake storyline just to get ratings. Oh, and the interviewer said, when I asked Sandoval, he insisted that if he was going to script a fake storyline, it wouldn't have been one that destroyed his life. I would have never participated in that, he said. Willingly, I said. You would have never participated in that willingly, since you did technically continue to film the show. Right, willingly, he said. Hell no. So that right there is just, it reminds me of the comment that he made on the Nick Viles podcast when Nick asked him, what did you learn from the situation? He finally answered, not to cheat that way. So it's just, he can't even form a correct sentence. It just tanks it in some way or another. So he also referenced his time on Special Forces, and even that was not in the most constructive or insightful light. He can't just talk about the positive lessons or the outcomes he took with him following that experience. This is what was said in the article. Sandoval says on the show, before he's dunked in frigid waters and dragged across a field on the former Nickelodeon star JoJo Siwa's back, when Sandoval didn't win the competition, he felt robbed. He thought producers made it look as though he got eliminated before Siwa, who voluntarily withdrew. They said she lasted longer than me, he said, but she definitely did not. He was convinced the producers didn't want him to win. So this is victim mentality if I have ever seen it. His biggest concern is that he thought the producers were out to get him by making it seem that JoJo outlasted him. Come on, man. She carried you. A tiny former tween Nickelodeon girl picked your dead weight ass up and literally carried you on her back, and you have the audacity to have your main takeaway from that experience be that you don't want the audience thinking she outlasted you. If this is truly your standout overview of your experience, I think you missed the entire point of going on that show and what you could have personally gained from it. Stepping out of the victim mentality, you can't help but radiate. So, regarding Raquel, she never even gave me any closure, he said. It was really hard. It still messes with me. I'm sorry, but let's not forget, after Sandoval broke, obviously, there was paparazzi following his every move, watching where he was. He was spotted with several different women while Raquel was in treatment. He's now trying to play the victim role of like a scorned lover with Raquel. Even in current interviews to this day, he's still trying to peddle this narrative. Especially now that it's come out on Rachel's podcast that Tom basically shamed her for extending her stay at a treatment center to continue working on her mental health and called her selfish for not wanting to check out prematurely to just hang out with him again, to likely just stroke his ego and make him feel better about the downfall of his own life. He wasn't in love with Rachel. He was in love with how she made him feel about himself. She thought he was amazing, thoughtful, hot, a good friend, caring. And in a way, I think Tom kind of knew the longer she stayed there and the more help she got, the more her positive vision of Tom would diminish. So it seemed like he tried to manipulate and gaslight her into thinking it was selfish of her to work on herself, as opposed to checking out early and being a support to him. Listen, if you truly love someone, you want them to not only become the best version of themselves, but also encouraging them and supporting the hard decisions they have to make to evolve into a better person. I believe what Tom is referencing with Rachel is not being in love with her, but loving her infatuation with him. So anyway, after the first part of the interview, who was originally supposed to be at his confessional taping for Vanderpump Rules the next day, but Bravo quickly caught wind of his O.J., Simpson, and George Floyd comments and stated he wasn't feeling that great that day. 2 weeks later, the interviewer finally was able to attend his next confessional for the show. She states, Riley wasn't here this time. Instead, we were joined by a Bravo publicist and Erica Forstat, a senior NBC Universal executive. My clue that this wasn't typical was when Forstat introduced herself to Sandoval. But the fact that they had to have an executive come and just listen to what Tom is saying. All in all, I think the interview seemed pretty accurate of who he is as a person, in my opinion, having watched him since season 1, episode 1 of Vanderpump Rules all those years ago. But I do believe this interviewer subtly read him for filth. These are a few of the cringy but completely accurate descriptions and personal insights into the one and only Tom Sandoval. So the interview quotes, a decade later, Sandoval, who had a boyish innocence about him in those early seasons, has morphed into a unique Los Angeles species. He's late to everything, his publicist never seems to be able to reach him, and his face has that taunt sheen that celebrities get from anti-aging protocols. He talks about his life not in years, but in seasons and episodes. Sometimes he pauses mid-sentence and stares into the middle distance like a doll whose wind-up key has jammed until whatever ambulance, helicopter, or other sound-interfering entity has passed, and then he continues as if nothing happened, even when there are no mics or cameras on him. The ceiling lights in his home are taped over with sheets of paper to diffuse light and make it optimal for filming. He used to remove them during the off-season, but now he doesn't bother. Sandoval began to perform loud vocal exercises. He applied pomade to his hair, combing it back with his fingers, and changed into a light blue women's suit from Zara, which he said he preferred to the store's menswear. The suit looked good, but the sleeves barely reached his wrists. As he emerged from the dressing room, there was something about the suit's feminine cut, combined with Sandoval's physique and slightly hunched posture that reminded me of Heath Ledger's Joker in the scene at the hospital where he wears a nurse's uniform. Clearly, the highlight standout sentence to me from this entire article. And finally, that's what he was doing now, sitting in front of the camera in a powder blue suit and sunless tanner, being honest in his feels. I watched him on a monitor as he peered into the lens with one eyebrow slightly raised. Then the camera rolled and his face lit up with a big, genuine smile. And there you have it, ladies and gentlemen, Tom Sandoval, the most hated man in America.